Well, this is Ed Stetzer Live, and I am alive. I have really just biked for an hour up and down hills, and so I'm dragging, but I am alive. I'm trying to get a little more healthy. Some of you know that I've about 4.5 years ago started a weight loss journey, and I'm not like anyone's example or anything of that sort, but lost down about 100 pounds. But I got to tell you, some Saturdays my wife's like, let's go biking, but here we are an hour later. But I'm glad dragging, but here, but excited. My brain's working, so I guess that's good, and we'll be able to talk. And so again, Ed Stetzer Live. So I'm Ed Stetzer. I'm the Dean of the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University here in Southern California, which is why you can go out and bike in the morning in the beautiful sunshine every single day. Sometimes I just want rain and snow, but they don't give that to us here. So we're talking today about Gen Z. Now you know, I don't know if like normal people really know what Gen Z is, but think in terms of people born from, well, there's different measures of this, but between 1997 and 2012. So, and again, some people frame that a little bit differently, but you think of people, teenagers to young adults. All three of my daughters are in this range, though my oldest daughter likes to say she's not Gen Z. She likes to believe she's millennial. But again, depends on how you count. And as a professor, you know, and as a dean, you know, we just welcomed the largest incoming class to the Talbot School of Theology, Talbot Seminary in history. Most or undergrad students, most in and around that age grade. Moody Bible Institute, which, you know, Ed Stetzer Live is a production of Moody Radio, which is a ministry of Moody Bible Institute. All these age groups. But all those contexts tend to be more Christian kids, which I think is great. It's important. I love that both Moody Bible Institute and Biola are what we call covenant Christian institutions. You need to be a Christian to go here. Not everybody actually is, but they need to have a profession, and it creates a kind of learning environment that's great. But also we need to ask the question, I mean, you look around today, what's really going on with Gen Z? So when I talk to my daughters, I'm saying, you know, tell me about your friends, tell me about the people you hang with, tell me people you know. And what we find is I mean, Gen Z's, it's pretty interesting and confusing reality. Let me give a little example. I'm the editor of a magazine called Outreach Magazine, and I wrote about this recently in my editor's column. 2020 sort of hit culture like a meteor hitting a moon, right? And so the moon's going 5 different directions at the same time. So you find some Gen Z becoming very secular. Some Gen Z becoming actually much more open to Christian faith. Now, we'll post this. Karen's our producer. Karen, post that USA Today article I sent you last week. Post that at edstetzerlive.com, please. So I wrote an article in USA Today just last week, and another one a month before that, because they wanted me to focus on Easter Sunday. They published my article on the increase in interest in Gen Z, particularly young men. Now, mind you, I don't want you to think that there's a revival going on among Gen Z or Gen Z men. I think a lot of young men are probably more drawn to Andrew Tate, who's kind of the worst example of just sinful masculinity that's out there. I think probably many more are influenced by Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson, who I don't put in the same categories as one another, and then are being discipled in local churches. And so I want a revival of young men and young women in Gen Z who are coming to faith in Christ and being discipled in their churches. And we're seeing openness, and we're gonna have an expert come on just a minute to talk to us about this. You know, just last night, my church, I'm at Mariners Church, which is a Southern California church, and we have a young adult service on Thursday nights, and it's duplicated to our weekend services. Our weekend services start Thursday night. And we had over 3,000 students last night, or not students, sorry, young adults last night. So most of whom would be in Gen Z. So there's an openness, but man, there's also a whole lot of people going a different direction. Remember, it's like a meteor hit a moon, and some of it's moving in a direction you like, and some of it's going the wrong direction, and some of it's just going 10 directions at once. So today, enough Ed Stetzer talking about this, but I wanted to frame this a little bit, because this is very of high import to me. Like, I'm writing about this regularly in scholarly publications, in popular publications, and in research. So today I have Tanita Maddox. She's the National Director for Generational Impact for Young Life. I mean, I think Young Life, everyone's sort of heard of Young Life, which I love. And she serves as an Associate Regional Director in the Mountain West Life region. She, with an expertise in contextualizing the gospel for Gen Z, Tanita has written the book, What Gen Z Really Wants to Know About God. She's served as a youth leader with adolescents for over 26 years and is a volunteer young life leader in her community. Tanita Maddox, I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the program, and tell us a little bit about why you decided to write this book.
Like you said, I've been a young life leader for a long time, and I just felt like I was failing. Like it just hit me, about 2016. I just was seeing panic attacks, kids with too much anxiety to come to school, too much anxiety to come to Young Life. I was seeing kids who didn't want to hang out in groups, so I'd try to get a group of girls together for breakfast, and I'd get all these little singular one-on-one texts of, I don't want to go in the group, I just want to go with you. And even just some open hostility rather than apathy when I came on campus from kids who just did not like that I had a Bible, that I was talking about Jesus. And I honestly, my first thought was, I'm getting too old for this. I was entering 40. I was like, I'm not relevant anymore. When I was giving messages and talking about who Jesus was and sharing the gospel, it just was falling flat. And I thought it was me. And then I realized what had happened was that there was a generational shift, and we had Gen Zers and we didn't know it. And they came so fast and changed things so quickly that I was caught on my heels, and then have spent the last time since then understanding, listening, studying, and found that I'm not the only member of Gen X and other previous generations who did not know what was going on and don't know what's going on. And so I wrote this so that we can say, hey, let's figure out what's going on so we can love our next generation and share the gospel with them.
Gen X, I love that you threw that in there, because we are the underappreciated and undervalued generation. We drank water from the hose. We stayed out until the street lights came on. I don't know. I'm carrying the torch for Gen X. So glad to hear you just work that in there. But so Gen Z is, there's a pretty significant difference. And I think a lot of times, people our age who are Gen Xers or boomers or older than us, or millennials, maybe they sometimes think, man, if you just did student ministry the way we did student ministry, and I was a youth pastor, so I was a youth pastor like 8,000 years ago, and for a short amount of time, at the request of those youth, I'm no longer a youth pastor. They were like, you need to go be a pastor. But I guess we kind of assume that maybe if we just did what we did, but the reality is Gen Z is starting not just at one different place, but at 10 different places. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, a lot of times a cross-generational interaction is a cross-cultural interaction, because Gen Z has its own cultural norms, taboos, language, their values, experiences, worldview. All that really forms how they're engaging the world, and it is different than previous generations. And so we can feel like we're hitting our head against the wall when we're even trying to use the same words, like I want you to feel accepted, I want you to feel safe, and we actually are not talking about the same thing because they have a very different generational context.
Fascinating. And again, I think that's a big part of it. I love the fact that you approach Gen Z missiologically, contextually. That's of course my field. That's my passion. I'm a missiologist. Love that that's what we're engaging in. So let me just invite our listening audience. So again, let me just tell, the name of the book is What Gen Z Really Wants to Know About God, which I want to tell you. I want you to tell me, what does Gen Z really want to know about God? And you can call in. Maybe you've got questions. My guess is some of your parents of Gen Z folks like me, and you're a little unsure, like, how do I approach my son or my daughter, or my guess is for many of you, you're seeing the next generation as more progressive. Even though I think there's some bright signs of spiritual openness, by and large, the next generation is more progressive. You might have all kinds of different questions. It's 877-548-3675. And here's the great thing. We actually have some copies of the book to give away. And so want you to call in. We'll give away some copies of the book to our amazing callers. It's not like call in and say, hey, I'm caller number 7. It's bring a great comment, bring a great question. I'm happy to give away a book. Again, it's called What Gen Z Really Wants to Know About God. Here's the number again. I'm going to give it twice. They yell at me because I give it too fast. It's 877-548-3675. That's the fast version. Here's the slow version. 877-548-3675. Okay, your book's sort of framed around like questions young people are asking. Do we say young people? Is that what old people say? Is that what Gen Xers say about Gen Z? We call them young people. Sounds like what's what my grandmother would say. The young people. I don't know. So what do we call them?
I like the term young people because we're not necessarily only talking about middle school students. We're not necessarily only talking
Yeah.
about college kids or young adults, but the young people in our lives.
Okay, so you had 7 questions. Don't give us all the questions because we're going to go through and have some conversation. But what's like one, let's start with one of the questions you really think they're asking.
Well, and these questions are so important because one of the things that was happening with me in youth ministry is I realized I was answering questions they weren't asking and then not answering these questions they're asking. So one of the questions that's a big question with our Gen Zers is the question, am I enough? I mean, most of us have probably heard a young person use that phraseology for something in their life. Am I going to be enough? Am I enough? And I would add, there's a couple words you could put on the end of that for it to make a little more sense, which is, am I enough to be loved and to be valued?
Okay. And so we hear these questions, and we're going to talk more about them in just a moment. We're going to take your calls. Am I enough to be valued? Good place to start. Lots to talk about here. I mean, we're in the midst of a generational shift. We need to know what's going on. Let me remind you of our phone number. We're going to get to the calls after the break. What Gen Z really wants to know about God's our conversation. Phone number 877-548-3675. Again, that's 877-548-3675. Hey, we're back. Ed Stetzer live. Tanita Maddox is our guest. We're talking about Gen Z. And by the way, I mentioned your book a couple times. It's What Gen Z Really Wants to Know About God. It's technically out in 2 days, but that's a farce, just so you know. I'm just giving it all away right now. If you go order it at Amazon right now, they're not going to wait 2 days to send it to you. It's there. I bet, Tanita, do you have a copy of your book right now? Yes or no?
I have it right in front of me.
Exactly. So it's all this whole pub date. Anyway, I'm a little bitter sometimes because like people think they can't order a book. If you pre-order right now, they're going to send it to you today. So go get that book. It's What Gen Z Really Wants to Know About God. And so, okay, so we actually got a lot of calls lining up. But before we get to the calls, let's when we give me a little more kind of description, maybe a 1-paragraph description of if you had to look at the typical Gen Zer. What is she like? And again, we're generalizing because there are Christian Gen Zers or non-Christian Gen Zers, 100 different things. But like you're looking out, you're thinking, who am I trying to reach? How would you describe this to a new staff member at Young Life?
Generally, they've been described as digital natives because they've had access to smart and interactive technology from a very young age. So they understand the digital space very, very well and the culture that exists there. There's been a wave of mental health issues as they've come of age: anxiety, loneliness, depression, self-harm. There's also a high value of safety that has come up with the generation. And, while they're coming of age, they just had social media, they had school shootings, they had a global pandemic that landed right on top of them. And so many people ask me, why are they so anxious? And I look at this and I say, oh my goodness, how are they still standing?
Yeah, no, it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, to see what has been experienced in the last few years. I mean, again, from 2020 forward, you have, it's not just the pandemic. It's 15 things. It's sort of, and continued to go on and on and on. Hey, we better get to the calls because we got some good calls sort of coming up here. Okay, so let's go to David in Florida. David, you're live on the air. Go right ahead.
Hi, that's me. So my wife and I had twin girls in 2001. We had them in New York City, actually, and moved to Florida afterwards. But like right before September 11th, I mean. But my point is, they were raised in the church, and my wife and I have tried to get them on the straight and narrow path as best we can. Understated, it's their free will. But they were turned off by older people in the church expressing political views that are pretty radical, and they're still interested in God, but we can't really get them to go to church.
Okay, so let's first of all stay on the line. We want to give you a copy of What Gen Z Really Wants to Know About God. So Tanita, how do you make that bridge? I mean, I think that's not an uncommon bridge that David's talking about. That maybe I'm open to spiritual things, but church not so much.
Well, there's two dynamics in here, actually two questions that are being addressed in their interactions right now. And one is, can I trust you? So Gen Z has grown up with a very high distrust of institutions, of power, of previous generations, of education. And so they're entering the world not saying the church should be trusted, but that the church is an institution and institutions should not be trusted. So they're coming from a low place of trust. First of all, we have to earn their trust. It's not given freely, and they know that. And then they want to know that they are accepted. Will you accept me? And for their context, for their generation, they have not witnessed or experienced likely people who do not agree with each other and accept each other at the same time. And so that complex relationship with acceptance for them doesn't exist. So acceptance means agreement. If you agree with me, then you accept me. If you don't agree with me, you don't accept me. So those two dynamics are at play right there that they are wrestling with, that is part of their generational context.
Yeah. So what would you suggest about then making the bridge between faith and ultimately church? Is the right, if you're trying to engage Gen Z, is the right step to invite them to church? Is the right step to enter into an ongoing conversation and relationship? Is it to go to apologetics? Is it different on each situation? Help us to know more about that.
Well, I like what you said. It's different for every situation. My background is cultural apologetics, and it tends not work to argue a young person into the faith. However, they are looking for authenticity. That trust piece and acceptance piece goes along with, are you who you say you are all of the time? Can I see the real deal? And so actually inviting a Gen Zer over to your house for dinner, or to help you with lawn work, or to go for a walk, or go to the grocery store, very everyday common activities where they aren't feeling like you're putting on a show, like sitting in an office or a restaurant, is fine. But they want to see what your real life looks like. How does your faith in God actually change how you shop for food, or interact with the cashier, or all the different normal things that are part of our lives? That's what they want to see, is to start there, not with a program, not with a building, but with a personal conversation.
Yeah, we've been a little surprised. I mentioned that the church I'm at, I'm a teaching pastor at a church called Mariners Church. And, we started this young adult service, I don't remember how long ago it was now, maybe a year and a half ago. And we kind of thought to be, we're a large church, so we thought maybe 800 to 1,000. And like I said, it's really exploded. We had over 3,000, I think 3,200 last night. And there is a sense that for a lot of them, a lot of them will be Christian, I shouldn't say kids, but Christian young adults. But also, too, there's been a surprising number. We had hundreds commit their lives to Christ in the last couple of months. And we're really seeing this. And the church invitation seems to work for that segment of them. I don't think it works for everyone, but we're just seeing the people who show up. As a whole, do you find Gen Z, again, if you're an Xer and I'm an Xer, we've been around for a few generations. So do you see them as more spiritually open, less spiritually open? I'm asking you about openness. I know statistically they're less religious and less Christian, but what about spiritually open?
Yeah, spiritually open for sure. They're looking for truth. They're looking for acceptance. They're looking for enoughness. That leads you on a spiritual journey by itself. And Gen Z trusts Gen Z. Like, they'll trust each other and each other's, testimony of what's going on. So I'm going to guess too that you've got some great stuff going on at Mariners Church, where Gen Zers are telling other Gen Zers, come with me, you have to check this out, because they trust each other in this. And they're looking for trustworthy sources to ask their questions, to bring their doubts. And, typically, generally, Gen Z doesn't think the church is open to their questions, open to their doubts. And so they're holding them back, but they're actually very curious, and they're dying to talk about it with someone who's older than them.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think ultimately, David, good question. Hold on the line. Karen's going to come on and give you a copy of the book. Let's go to Cammie in Paris, California. Cammie, you're live on the air. Go right ahead.
Hi, yeah, I'm calling to find out, if you have, the teenagers now, you raise them in church from a baby all the way up to church, but now they got this thing where I'm anti-God. I don't want to have nothing to do with God. God can't do nothing for me. And then, you try to show them how God is blessing me in my life. I try to show my kids that, but I have one Gen X teenager that's like, I'm anti-God. I don't want to have nothing to do with God. God can't do nothing for me. He can't help me. I'd rather not even go to church. I don't want to go to church. That type of thing. How do you kind of encourage them and bring them back into, the fold, just to, not like force God back on them, but just encourage them slowly, because right now they're thinking I don't want to have nothing to do with God. I'm done with God. God can't do nothing for me.
Yeah, no, I think it's a common question, Cammie. Hold on the line. We're going to make sure you listen to Tanita's answer, and then we'll give you a copy of her book, What Gen Z Really Wants to Know About God. But let me tell you about a conversation I had with my daughter this week. My daughter is in her 4th year of Biola University, about to graduate. This is my youngest daughter, very committed to the Lord. And when she was in high school, she was not dissimilar to what you just described. And I said to her, she said to me, she said, it was so funny, we're very close. She said, you used to drive me crazy when you would say to us when we were teenagers, just kind of stay in, I could exactly, I say, you're in our home, you have to come to church with us. And then, you kind of figure out what you're going to do, but I think eventually you'll want to come and be a part of whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And I forget exactly how I phrased it. But she said, it used to drive me crazy when you said that. And I didn't say a lot, we made them go to church with us when they lived in our house, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes they didn't want to. She didn't want to. And she said, but, now I get what you were saying is that, and there is a sense that when you raise up a child in the way they should go, it's a proverb, it's not a promise. And so I don't want you to be discouraged, Cammie, because, I was in your shoes a few months ago. Now, it doesn't always turn out great. It's complicated. These individuals who start making their own choices and thinking with their own brains, it is complicated. But your question is how do I help bring them back? So let's hear from Tanita. I just wanted to share that just brief encouragement of my own experience. Tanita, what do you think about Cammie's question?
Well, it is a question rooted in pain on both sides. It is painful as a parent to watch that, and that kind of rejection of faith usually is resulting or is a part of a painful or disappointing experience also. And so we have to remember that this isn't necessarily, again, an apologetic, logical conversation. It's a conversation about pain and experience and how do you sit with someone and walk with someone through that. And I like to think of Jesus when he shows up to Lazarus's death, and Mary says, if you had been here, this wouldn't have happened. Just this idea that a good God would have stopped this, would have never let it happen. Martha says the same thing, but she comes around with saying, and she expresses her faith in Jesus. But you also have the criminal on the cross next to Jesus who says, if you're really God, climb down, take me with you. So there's this idea that why would God let this happen? But what Jesus does with Mary is he does not admonish her or point out all the good things that God's done. He cries next to her. And so I think there's a piece of that we learn from as we listen to our young people who are mad at God or don't want to believe in God. And we just ask a lot of questions. Tell me more about that. I'd like to hear. Help me understand. And give them a place to wrestle. Because at that point right there, we are representing Jesus in our lives with that person. And God can handle those questions and can listen to them and say, tell me more. And they can bring all of that to him, but we are standing there as the physical kind of expression of that. And it is painful for us. And that's where we also go to the Lord and say, Lord, help me handle and hold the pain that you were holding for my child, and let them process it and be that open place for them to be able to process those things. And of course, I believe in prayer. I don't know, you believe in prayer. And that's about the most control we have is I can get on my knees and pray for my child. And then I remember going to the Lord and saying, this is not the story I would have written for my child. And I remember very clearly feeling like the Holy Spirit was nudging me saying, it is not your story to write.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I got to tell you, raising teenage girls, I have 3 daughters. It broke me. It was the thing in my life that was harder than anything else. But man, what a joy. What a relationship we have now. So hang in there. I'll give you some advice that I was given. And I don't know where this came from. It might have come from James Dobson, but the person who told me was actually an elder in our church. He said, here's the thing you got to remember in these difficult teenage years. He says, when they were little, you take them home, and you basically carry them around in a basket. And then they get a little bigger and they run around, but you can still see them and call them back. And then they get to these years, middle school girls is when, well, anyway. And he said, think of it like being on a boat. You went through the calm waters and it goes a little faster in the toddler years. And then you're hitting the rapids in the middle school, high school years. And he said to me with such good wisdom, he said, in the middle of those rapids, your number one job, you can't, they're not going to listen to you as much, et cetera, et cetera. Some of them are not going to listen to you at all. But if you can just keep them in the boat, what you don't want to lose is them out of the boat, and then you're out of communication. You're not able to influence them later on. And so, man, I got to tell you, I had to make some choices and say, okay, we'll do this together. I had to walk them through some difficult things, but we kept them in the boat. And so now, yesterday was my wife's birthday. We all got together. We get together all the time, and they're not all at the same place spiritually, but they're all in relationship with their parents, and we're continuing to have conversation about their spiritual growth and more. We're going to continue our conversation in just a moment. If you want to give us a call, join in 877-548-3675. That's 3675. Okay, we're back. Ed Stetzer Live. By the way, go to edstetzerlive.com. You can see Tanita's book over there. And did I mention if you order it right now, they really won't wait to ship it? I don't know why that really bothers me, but I just know that it's a farce and you can get the book right now, even though it's pre-order and it's out 2 days from now. So it'll be there in 2 days. But anyway, and do it. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. I bet Tanita, we were speaking at a conference together and really think she's a great communicator and really enjoyed her book. And I want to encourage you to pick it up as well. These are important questions about Gen Z, and we're going to take your calls. Let me remind you of our phone number, 877-548-3675. I'd love to hear some of you Gen Zers out there. I know you Gen Zers listen to this more via podcast than you do live, so maybe we've got to get you to listen live. But by the way, anyone can listen via podcast. We have thousands and thousands of people who listen via podcast. Go to edstetzerlive.com. You can listen to these anytime on your listening device. But maybe some Gen Z are out there. I'd love to hear from you. Like, what are your thoughts about this? 877-548-3675. Okay, so let's go to Debbie in Tennessee. Debbie, you're live on the air. Go right ahead.
Thank you for taking my call. My 17-year-old granddaughter lives a couple of states away. We talk often. We're friends. We have a good relationship. She is not in any kind of a church situation, and she's getting an extremely secular education. I guess I'm just asking for some advice on how you reach those far-off grandchildren that you have occasional conversations with. We are close, and she does ask me real questions.
Oh, that's so cool, Debbie. Well, I love that. My daughters are close to their grandmother as well. And I think Debbie's question is a good one. And one of the things is, Debbie, we are going to give you a copy of what Gen Z really wants to know about God. Tia, before you answer her question, is the book more geared towards people like her granddaughter or people like Debbie? Is it for the Gen Zer or is it for the person engaging the Gen Zer?
It's actually for both, and I encourage adults or older generations to read it with a Gen Zer and then talk about it with each other. Like, is this really what you're experiencing?
Okay, and so maybe that's part of the answer to Debbie's question, is to go through the book with her, but what would you suggest? She wants to influence her 70-year-old granddaughter, who she's close to, towards Christ and Christian things.
Well, the good news is that your granddaughter is probably way more comfortable having those conversations from a distance than maybe we are. So texting through a screen, FaceTime, those different kind of apps that allow for that digital communication, that's going to be the first language of her granddaughter, which is so great because she's set up to have these conversations from a distance. And I think some of it is just asking questions and listening, going through these questions that, hey, I read this. Tell me what you think about acceptance, or do you think God is good? And allow them to process that. There are other tools out there like what's called a Between You and Me journal. They're all over Amazon. And it sets up prompts so that each person takes a turn to write in this journal and then give it to one another. And you may not mail a journal back and forth to one another, but to be able to share the things you're writing to each other really, really helps. And just the simple question, how can I pray for you? How can I be praying for you? And to make sure you follow up on those. And in those interactions, we get to point out the ways that our young people are experiencing God, but may not be recognizing that they're experiencing God.
Yeah, that's actually a cool idea, though, the intentionality. My father died earlier this year, and one of the things we're very thankful for is my daughter, his granddaughter, I don't know what these things are called, but like they send questions and he answers and she puts them in a book, and that was really great for both of them. So I love that, and to doing that on a spiritual level is even better. Okay, let's go to Raj in Oklahoma. Raj, you're live on the air. Go right ahead with your question or your comment.
As a medical practitioner and a boomer, one of the tools that I use is storytelling, like parables. I was wondering what tool you think is best in conveying our message and our faith to the Gen Z generation.
That's a super question, Raj. Stay on the line. We're going to give you a copy of What Gen Z Really Wants to Know About God. Tina, help us out. What do you think?
Have you ever heard the terms, this is my truth, this is your truth, that's her truth? Like that's become kind of a cultural norm these days, is this, personalized truth. Well, one of the actual good things that comes out of it is we have a great space for sharing personal testimony, personal story, because we can say, hey, can I share with you the truth in my life? And then we get to share the story as a witness. And then this young person, they can lean in, they can say, oh, hey, thanks for telling me, and walk away. They can ask more questions. But what they've learned in their generational context is to not argue with someone else's story, because that is their truth, how they're experiencing the world. That's how their generation would talk about it. So we actually get this sweet space now to share our stories.
Fascinating. Love that. Okay, so at the end of the day, these kinds of conversations, the whole point of your book is there are kind of questions around which young people are discussing or wondering or asking. And we're going to get to some of those. Let me remind people, you can call us, 877-548-3675. Again, that's 877-548-3675. Now, you got people in the background, I hear, Tina. You're speaking at a conference. Where are you? I
am in Cle Elum, Washington. At an event for Young
Gen
Life.
Z thing? Oh, event for Young Life. Sure. Well, it's just good for people to know that you're not just, in a Starbucks. You're actually at an event in a back room, having a conversation with us, talking to your leaders about Gen Z. So I love that. That's good. I love that you're doing that. Okay, so 7 questions. I asked you to tell me one. Tell me another, and I'll give more people a chance to call, 877-548-3675. What's another of the 7?
Well, safety is a big value for this generation. So am I safe is a massive question they're asking about life and faith. And you can make that a faith question by saying, am I safe with God?
Okay, good. Give me another one. Tell me more about it. Give me a little bit longer answer. I want you to unpack one of those questions for me.
Yeah, let's talk about safety because it's a big one. And that one just kind of rose up with Gen Z. And like you mentioned earlier, us Gen Xers who were, running around the neighborhood and, there was a news reminder, right? Do you know where your children are? Like, that kind of thing for us as we were growing up, right? And so safety was like, hey, don't talk to strangers. That was kind of the extent of safety, I think, for me. And this young group of young people has grown up now with safety being emotional safety, physical safety, psychological safety, spiritual safety, safety from disagreement, safety from being uncomfortable, safety from risk, safety from failure. It has taken on a huge definition. And at the same time, it's so personal. So if I, surveyed 10 different people and said, what would it take to make you feel safe in this space? We would get 10 different answers. And so it's really actually hard to get our hands around it because it's a definition that's constantly moving around. And so when we use the word safe with our young people, we actually need to ask more questions about what they mean when they're using those words so we can figure out how does the gospel, how does the Bible interact with the things that they're looking for.
So good. Okay, well, let's get to some more calls. Let me remind people again, 877-548-3675 is our number. Let's go to Dee in Chicago. Dee, you're live on the air. Go right ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I was wondering, how do I handle my daughter has gone now into New Age from Christianity, and just says there's no sin, there's no death, and it's just really just heartbreaking.
Oh yeah. So New Age, as in like what, crystals? But what kind of New Age sort of things?
The new age, what they believe, they can bring things forth to them by their confession. The law of attraction.
Right, manifesting things. Yeah.
Yes, and things like that. And I mean, it has just turned her life upside down. She doesn't even go outside anymore. Going on 3 years.
Wow.
Terrible.
Okay. Well, Dee. Wow. Okay. So I want to actually give you a second to think about this answer, and we're gonna continue our conversation on the other side and jump in on Dee's question. But Dee, if you'll hold on, we want to give you a copy of the book, What Gen Z Really Wants to Know About God, and remind all of you that we've got one more segment left. We're going to go right to the calls when we get back. Well, after Tanita answers Dee's question. 877-548-3675. Last time with the phone number, because this is pretty much your chance to get on if you'd like to make a phone call. 877-548-3675. Hey, this is Ed Stetzer Live. We've got one more segment. We're going to go right to your calls after we give Tanita a chance to respond to Dee's question about her, I think it was her daughter, kind of moving into New Age beliefs and how might she respond. Because Tanita, it's pretty wild. I mean, I think one of the things, like I said, I wrote in USA Today about some Gen Z are engaging in church at a higher level, but most are not, and many are into some pretty weird stuff. Tell us about that.
One of the things I think is really encouraging about Gen Z is their longing for justice, because I think it actually points to the fact that they understand that sin exists. And here's what I mean by that. If you are standing up to say that something needs to be set right, that something is wrong, if they're looking at the world and saying, this is not how it's supposed to be, what they're really acknowledging is the existence of sin in our world. They may not call it that, but they have a sense of that. And I think that is actually really encouraging. And then they have grown up in a society, a time in our culture that has removed the authority of ultimate truth. And so sometimes when I sit with young people, I'll say, I just can't imagine how hard it must have been for you to figure out what is right, what is wrong, to stand for good, to stand against what is bad, with no compass handed to you on how to decipher those things. And you've been left to figure it out by yourself. And they have I've seen Gen Zers cry, their shoulders relax, because no one has stopped to say, I'm so sorry, that must be so difficult, because they are longing for justice, but with no terminology around it.
Yeah. So good. Again, let's go to Kirk in Southeast Florida. Kirk, you're live on the air. Go right ahead.
Ed and the young lady, I want to congratulate you. This is probably one of the best segments I've ever heard on you, on Ed. And I have a heart for Gen Z. I have grandchildren that age. But in these last 5 days, I came to realize the whole story about in 2012, an 18-year-old boy, Charlie Kirk, decided he wanted to do something to help his generation. And over these last 13 years, he's been to college campuses, high school campuses, and he just debates anybody. And students get in line 100 behind a microphone that he takes one at a time, and no raising voice, no argument, no nothing. This is what I believe, and tell me what you believe. And he's got hundreds of thousands of clubs on high school. And so everything you all are saying, it was like God set this up 13 years ago, and right now the impact he's making on young women, but especially dominantly more men. So I want to encourage your author, and I want to encourage you, Ed, to keep doing what you're doing, because you're not the only ones out there doing it, and there is a process that seems to be working. So I just wanted to remind you all of what Charlie Kirk has accomplished in 13 years. And I think now with his assassination, it will just explode because everybody's going to want to find out, like I did, more about him.
Hey, thank you, Kirk, for your call. And we're out of books, so I'd give you another one. But what a tragic week, too. I mean, just to see this and so many lives impacted and just heartbreaking for all. We go, our prayers go to Erica and his kids and so many others impacted as well. Let's go to Cece in Indiana. Cece, you're live on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Just a quick question. I guess we have a daughter who has very strong faith. At least she professes that she has a very strong faith, but she's living in a lifestyle, more of a homosexuality lifestyle, and living with a woman. She's 19, and how do we try to talk to her about what's right and what's wrong and what's right in God's eyes as well?
Yeah, Case, I mean, I appreciate the way you're asking that. And of course, Danita, you know, let's ask specifically Cece's question, but I want you also to talk about just in general. This is a major issue. Whereas, a lot of boomers like, well, this is clear, this is settled. Where a lot of Gen Zers, even Christian Gen Zers are struggling with their own beliefs, how to articulate them. But let's just start with Cece's situation. What do you think, Tanita?
Yeah, when we become a follower of Jesus, like God takes the time with the work of the Holy Spirit to move through every part of our life. Thank God, slowly. I think I might have exploded upon impact when I decided to follow Jesus. And, and still in middle age, he's changing things slowly as I slowly give things up to him. So we trust in that process of sanctification by the Holy Spirit over time right there. I'm going to start there, that we were talking about, salvation, that giving our life to Jesus Christ, having a saving faith, and then let the Holy Spirit move through our lives in different ways. Now, let's talk about how our Gen Zers are engaging the world. Well, if experience is what dictates truth, which is what their generation has grown up with, that truth is what I experience. And if our identities are primarily sexual, which is what has also been put into this generational context, is that our internal experience and our sexual experience is what identifies who we are, then those things become intertwined. And then any kind of limitation on that, on sexuality or sexual expression, then becomes a limitation of who I am and as an identity, period. So that's the thing they're wrestling with. That you're talking about a core belief of where truth comes from is actually what we're wrestling with, what our young people are wrestling with. What is so cool about who God is that his identity for us is so much bigger than who someone's attracted to or who their gender identity is or their sexuality. And I like to tell young people, don't sell yourself short by basing your identity on this one thing. God's picture of who you are is so much bigger. It's so much greater and grander. So lean into who is God calling you to be? Who is he making you to be as you wrestle with these questions? And part of that work of faith, and I do this, is things I don't agree with or I don't understand with God. How do I wrestle that with him? And even with our young people, when we come against some of these big conversations, I say, hey, if you do not understand God or are angry with him, can you still follow him? And that is really what the obedient life of a Christian is.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And Cece, I feel that journey. It's a hard journey for sure. Let's go to Almeda in Garland, Texas. You're live on the air, Almeda.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much. I'm enjoying this. This is wonderful. But I have a praise report. Okay. I want to just share that when I was a middle-aged, I'm a baby boomer, so I was a middle-aged returning student and going back to library school. Was used to using dungeon automation like Dre. And these young Gen Zers saved my life and helped me to become successful in graduating, getting my master's degree, because they said, if you would teach us how it is to work in a library on a day-to-day basis, we're going to teach you everything you need to know about technology.
Wow, how fun.
It was perfect. Thank you.
Almeida, that is a great story. That is a great story. And it's a technology story for sure, which is, I work with Gen Zers every day, and it brings me great joy to do so, surrounded in a university setting. But address the technology just a little bit more. You mentioned earlier digital natives. Unpack that a little more for us, what it means, how technology is so pervasive in the lives of Gen Z.
Well, I don't think most of us realize that technology actually has its own language and its cultural dynamic that exists online, which may contribute to some of the miscommunications that maybe some of our boomers or Gen Xers may have with Gen Zers, in the digital space. Again, they have grown up with smart, interactive technology from a very, very young age, and they're very comfortable expressing themselves, having conversations, doing relationship through a screen. And I had a college student sit me down a while ago and tell me that I always sounded angry in my text messages, and I didn't know what he was talking about. And he said, well, you respond to things with a single thumbs up, and you end your sentences with a period. So I had broken 2 cultural communication rules for Gen Z, not even knowing it, because again, that's their first language. They know that space well, and it is not a first language for me.
Yeah, no, it is funny because it's a whole thing. Like I know now when I send 3 dots, ellipsis to my daughters, it's stuff like that. So, and they're like, don't put a winky face or do put this, et cetera, et cetera. But it does. I mean, of course, they do roll their eyes and they say their parents just don't understand. So I don't think it's offending them. But anyway, we've got about a minute left. I mean, what exhortation would you give to Christians? And first of all, I just want to say, encourage them, get what Gen Z really wants to know about God. But what exhortation would you have for the listeners about engaging Gen Z?
Start speaking with words of vision and hope over this generation. When you ask young people what they're hearing about themselves from the media, from older adults, it is overall negative. Weak, fragile, snowflake, over emotional, and they've yet to repeat a positive word. And I think we, who are supposed to be the stewards of the next generation, get the responsibility and the privilege to speak vision over them, because they will live into the words that we speak. So what are they hearing about themselves from us?
So good, so good. Our guest today has been Tanita Maddox. She's had a great new book. I want to encourage you to get it. It's focused on Gen Z. Again, it's called What Gen Z Really Wants to Know About God. Hey, thanks for listening as well. Let me thank our team at Moody Radio, my producer, Karen Hendren, my associate producer, Lisa Jemty, and my engineer, Merle St. James. And I think Cheyenne was on the phones today as well. To hear it again, go to edstetserlive.com. And thanks for listening to Ed Stetzer Live on Moody Radio.